Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of A Piece of Cake. And today we are going to somewhat continue what we were discussing last week. I'll hand over to our brother Abdurrahim. Abdurrahim, the title for today,
Yeah.
you want a bit of an explanation, background behind today's focus?
Yeah, I mean, today's focus is really on, the whole concept of why are there double standards? Why is there this hypocrisy? Why is there condemnation for one side, not for another? Why is there support for one side or another? And I think the point is there's so much rhetoric around, and the perfect example for me, I think, was this president of the European Union. I can't remember her name. What's her name?
I've got it. It's yeah.
You know that clip where she's clearly saying in front of the Europe,
Ursula von der Leyen.
Ursula von der Leyen, and she's saying there in front of everybody, Russia cutting off water and food supplies, and this is a breach of international law. This is whatever. We will hold you accountable, right? And yet at the same time, it's perfectly all right for Israel to do that, and whatever you need to do to defend yourself is acceptable. Yet whatever Palestinians need to do to defend themselves is not acceptable. And I think it's not the details. Like, we could talk about, and I think it's worth us bringing up examples, obviously. But I think what is interesting to discuss as a point of discussion, right, is that it's not so much the details of it. It's that why does that bother us so much, right? That's the question for me, right? The big question for me is, why does that bother? And it bothers everybody. No one likes it.
Right.
The big, what does everyone hate about politicians? What did everyone hate about Boris Johnson and his Partygate? One rule for you, another rule for us. Yeah. Hypocrisy, double standards. Yeah. Okay. Everyone has to be subjected to ABC, except rich people, except white people, except, black people, except men, women. It doesn't matter what it is. The fact is that what interests me is that thing in human nature that makes injustice so intolerable, right? That's so unbearable, that makes us so angry, that makes us so incensed, that we are prepared to do almost all sorts of extraordinary things to level the playing field. And you know what is really interesting, Abdul, what's really extraordinary? It doesn't seem to matter how good your life is, right? So if people are living a relatively good life, right? If you're living a relatively good life, so your own personal life, you're not really suffering in any, on any objective scale, right? So I'm just talking generally here. Obviously not talking about the Palestinians. I'm not talking about specific cases. I'm just talking about generally. If you are generally suffering, not suffering, but you're generally living objectively what seems to be a good life, but the discrepancy between you and the way you live your life and other people who are taking advantage of you is still going to make you angry and incensed, right? And especially if those people are not subjected to the same requirements and controls and laws and rules and regulations. We human beings just can't stand it.
Right.
We really just can't stand it. And it reminds me of something that Allah alludes to in the Quran, that killing, that injustice is worse than killing. Killing is bad. Killing is terrible. But that people live under injustice and oppression is worse. And it's a truism. It seems to be true about human nature. It seems to be true about human nature. We yearn for justice. We want justice. We want to be treated fairly. And we will go through revolutions, and we will go through wars, and we will sacrifice our own well-beings, our own even maybe relatively cushy, comfortable lives in order to right that wrong.
That's right.
And so people will put up with it for an amount of time. Right. And I just want to say two things about it, which I'm going to leave it to you then to see what you have to say about that. I think that injustice or justice comes, it comes in two ways, right? One is that the idea that everybody is treated equally under the law, right? So it could be that everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're white or black, whether you're man or woman, color, race or creed or whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah. If you throw a cigarette on the sidewalk, you're going to be lashed 80 times. Let's just say, for example, that's the law, right? Now, everyone gets the same treatment. It doesn't matter. You can be Prince Charles. You do it, King Charles, you do it, you get the punishment. No one escapes it. Everyone is subject to exactly the same punishment. But the punishment is not really a fair or reasonable or just punishment. Yeah. So that's one type of justice. One type of justice is where everyone gets the same treatment. Yeah. And the other realm, as I've sort of probably alluded it to already, is that you can have laws that may be applied equally to everybody, but those laws are not reasonable. They're not fair. They're not just. They're not really in tune with, what is proportionate. And of course, that's way, way more controversial because who decides that anyway? Right. But I think those are two interesting points of discussion. I don't know what your thoughts about that are. I think it's a good opening gambit for us to talk about. There's something fundamentally deep in human nature that just hates injustice. And when we see it and when we experience it, we can't put up with it for long.
No, Abraham, thank you. Jazakallah khair. I think that's a very good sort of setting. And wa alaikum salam to brothers, sisters, and even to our guests who've joined us. And it is a sensitive topic, as one of our sisters has highlighted there. And you're right, that innate sense of a requirement for justice, because Allah created everything with justice. Okay, and we know that. And when you were speaking, thinking about that, I was thinking about, okay, that verse you referred to is really important.
Yeah,
injustice is worse than killing, and the essence of that, the greatest injustice, is shirk, associating partners with Allah. But then when we look at the degrees that cascade from that, it speaks to what you're talking about. So let's stick with that point, with that verse first. It's really interesting that what is being done to the Palestinian people and has been done for generations now, but especially now, that Exodus, we have biblical stories of the Exodus with Musa alayhi salam, and what Bani Israel, and I'm saying the biblical story, but we know when we come to the Quran, the story is accurate and everything. The persecution they were undergoing, and they were not forced. There was divine revelation in that instance that they should leave with Musa, Prophet Musa and Harun, alayhim assalam. And I keep thinking about it, it's like, hold on, you know this story of the subjugation that you were enduring under Pharaoh at this time. If it's in the Torah, if it's in the Bible, if it's in the Quran, obviously, the final and perfect revelation, we know that there. So how can you then subject another people who you've been persecuted for generations to the same thing which is in the books of the Abrahamic faiths? This is something that really gets me.
Well, I think
that for me, that's a very pertinent point. The other aspect that I'd make in that regard, Abdurrahim, I'll hand back to you again. I'm coming from the sort of like the religious, the ideological perspective, and I mentioned it previously last week, is that we see that the persecution of people of faith in today's world seems to just go unnoticed. And why do I see that? Because people of faith, and I'm talking about Muslims in particular, we see it with other people faiths, but I'm talking about where there's tawheed, to whatever degree it's being observed or not by a people, the persecution seems to be even worse, targeting those people. And then the rest of the world that may be irreligious, okay, or not of the same faith, turn a blind eye. And we see society, as we're seeing today, played out over the media, desensitized to it. And that brings me to another story in the Quran, which we know in Surah Buruj and the tafsir. Abdurrahim, I remember you giving the tafsir of it in your study circles in the 90s and everything. And we saw that these were monotheistic Christians. So let's be clear here. There were monotheistic Christians being persecuted on account of their faith, that the king, the society that had power over them, just could not stand these people, to the point that they were burning them in the pits. And we know that the baby spoke to the mother from from her arms and just said, believe in Allah, and she got the faith and jumped in, because that there was the persecution that was taking place. And I could not help but think about these and juxtapose these stories of Bani Israel with Musa and that Exodus, people of the pit, the Surah Baruj, and what we're seeing. How can you make people, you've got them in a concentration camp condition, open air prison, as some saying. The land mass that they're living in, you and me both know the size of the Isle of Wight. Isle of Wight has 141,000 inhabitants, according to the 2019 census. Same size. Isle of Wight, Palestine. Same size, roughly, give or take a few miles.
Palestine or Gaza?
Gaza, sorry, Gaza, thank you.
Yeah.
Gaza. So Gaza, same size as Isle of Wight, and yet you've got 141,000 living in Isle of Wight, and you've got 2.5 million living in Gaza. And you control their water, you control their food, as you've mentioned, you control their electricity, you allow them in and out.
Yeah.
This is what was going on with Pharaoh and Musa at that particular time, and that was Bani Israel. Where are the lessons learned? But instead, what we see is that they've mastered the way of torment and persecution and marginalization of a people. Now, I want to be clear up to him, because some of them jump on us and say, oh, look at what they did in Israel and everything. Yeah, we've already touched upon that. We've already spoke about that previously. And that was not a justification, and it shouldn't have been done. Okay?
Yeah.
We mustn't now obfuscate that and cover that over, and understand that if you poke a bear long enough, if you corner a lion and you prod and torment it long enough, it's not just going to lie down and become complacent. It's going to respond in a way that is uncontainable, uncontrollable, whether it's right or wrong. So let's not forget that this, what happened last Saturday, worst thing in the 75-year history, understood, acknowledged. Yes, we hear that, but that 75-year history was at the expense of what and who? And it's generations that lived there that 75 years who've been displaced, and those who are living all over the world now, and they still hold the keys to the land that has since been taken in occupation. So these are contexts that we need to look at and draw parallels from the religious perspective, but obviously from a social perspective. But coming back to what you said now, bringing it full circle, you're absolutely right. Injustice is something that mankind, we cannot tolerate. And Abdurrahim, not only human to human injustice, when we see cruelty to animals, when we see the devastation of the climate change, the environment. But the poorer countries who are saying we're not going to exist if you continue with this, and the poor, richer countries saying, well, we're going to continue, but we're not going to allow you to have the same rights as us. We need to have these benefits. We need to continue extracting. The growing economies like India and others saying, well, we're going to join the ladder. And everyone knows suddenly 2011, we need to abide by these agreements. We will, you won't.
Yeah.
Injustice. on so many levels, double standards on so many levels, hypocrisy on so many levels. And one of the things I see, Abdurrahim, one of the answers that I would give to that in the short term, if you like, those who are contributing or who are purveying these double standards and injustices, they're only doing so for a perspective of their lifetime, their life cycle, because they're not interested in the subsequent generations. They're not interested in the voice of the youth. Look at Palestine. Look at Gaza. 50% of the population are under the age of 16. 50%. We see propaganda and look at the children of Israel. We don't want to see the children of Israel being butchered and anything like that. But just look at what's happening to the children in Gaza.
Yeah, but I think this is the real question that we need to ask is obviously everyone can see this. We all know this. Like, there's nothing we're saying that's that new. Yeah. I think the question to explore is what makes people behave like that? What makes people do that? And why are people generally so intolerant of it? I mean, this is what fascinates me. So I think we've already had some answers, right? So some of our brothers and sisters listening, have posted, interestingly, it's a feeling of superiority. And
Right.
I think in many ways that's what it comes down to, right? It comes down to the fact that you think you are better than people, and because you think you are better than them, that you can behave in a way that, it gives you permission to do things that you would never accept to be done to yourself. It gives you permission to treat people in a totally different way. I mean, I find this extraordinary. As I'm saying the words with my mouth, I find it really, really weird. Yeah, because I genuinely don't think about people collectively. Certainly, I may think that there are some individuals who are like that, right? I may think there are some individuals, but I don't think about that, people like that collectively, right? I don't think that because there are Jews who are treating Muslims badly, therefore all Jews are bad and they're all enemies, and I'm going to treat them all badly, and that's the way to behave towards them.
No,
Yeah,
that's right. I agree.
but there are people who would say that, by the way.
That's right. You're right.
There are people who would say that, and there are people who would say those sort of things, just as there are Israelis who are saying kill all, no, not just Israelis. You're talking about the foreign minister, I think it is, of Israel, saying they're all our enemies. There are no innocent civilians. This is literally what he said. There are no innocent civilians. Now, the thing is that, don't you realize that if you say that about Palestinians, then doesn't that entitle Palestinians to say exactly the same thing about you? If you think you're entitled to treat them in that way, why do you think they are not entitled to treat you in that way? This is what's extraordinary. If you say this about another group of people, why would it be wrong for another group of people to say that about you?
And on top of that, Abdurrahim, they had that done to them. We saw the dehumanization, as some of the brothers and sisters are mentioning. We saw that happen to them before we saw the atrocities of Nazi Germany. We saw the depiction of them, and you can get the archives and place them alongside each other, and the language is similar, if not the same. And then hearing we're going to break the backs of the enemy and stuff like this, and they need to rid the land of them. So exactly what you're saying, and as Alia said earlier, we said this last week, Jazakallah khair, anti-Zionism does not equate to anti-Semitism, and what you're saying is right, Abdurrahim, because those from the Jewish faith that subscribe to Zionism doesn't mean that it's all the Jewish faith. We have guidelines in the Quran in how to interact with them, and vice versa in that aspect there. But yes, you're right. If they're going to come with what this minister said about all of the Palestinians are basically subscribing to Hamas, Then
Human
when
animals. One of them called them human animals.
yes, I read that as well.
Like
Now,
that. That's exactly, that's the language of genocide. When you start
it
saying
is.
things
It
like that,
is.
you are on the, that's when you want to start killing people. When you start saying people they're cockroaches, they are this, they are
Language
that.
of the Crusades. Language of the
This is the
Crusades.
language, yeah. This is absolutely the language of, that's what you do. You dehumanize them because you're preparing yourself, because it's actually quite difficult for a human being to kill another human being, right? If you think they are like you, if you look at a group of people and you think they're just like us, they have families like us, they eat like us, they live like us, they laugh like us, they cry like us, yeah, they're so like us. What's really the difference between them and us? Very little. Yeah.
Right. And Abdurrahim, that's how that
Yeah, it's very
dehumanization.
hard to kill people who are
It
like
is.
you.
It is. Or
Yeah,
enslave
it's going
them.
to be hard to bomb a family
Exactly.
because you're thinking of bombing your mum. You think,
Yeah.
well, she's just like my mum, and that's just
Right.
like my
Right.
sister. But
Yeah.
that's exactly how we should think about each other.
Yes.
That's exactly
Right.
how we should. And I'm not saying like sometimes wars have to be fought, but even when you are fighting wars, I believe that's exactly how you need to think, right? You
Exactly.
need to think like that, right?
For
And
example, Abdurrahim, an
it's
example of
very
what you're
difficult.
saying.
It's very difficult. Yes, it might slow you down, right? It might make you not do things quite as decisively and as brutally as you think you might need to. But why is that a bad thing?
Right.
Why
So
is that a wrong
let's
thing?
give examples of what you're saying. I'm thinking of some examples of what you're saying. One from a religious and one from annals of history as well. When Ali was about to, he had somebody there who he was about to kill. He declared the Shahada. Ali still killed him. Okay, he didn't dehumanize him, but he felt he was saying that statement to save himself. Prophet
Yeah, it was
Sallallahu
Khalid bin Walid, not
sorry,
Ali. It was
Khalid bin Walid.
Khalid bin Walid. Yeah,
The Prophet ﷺ admonished him for that.
yeah,
Okay, what did you see in his heart? Did you open his chest and he
yeah,
ripped
yeah,
out?
yeah.
Then we move on from that. That was a lesson learned, okay, with regards to intention and how we deal with the enemy in that circumstance. Then we see in the World War, I'm not sure which one it was, you can remind me, World War One or World War Two, when it got to a point where I think it was over the Christmas period.
Yeah,
You had
World War One. It was the
the
first World War
Germans
in the
and the British,
trenches. Yeah,
they were
yeah,
in the trenches and they came out and played football with each other.
yeah.
Yeah, they came out and played football. They recognized what each other was doing in the trenches. They recognized the humanity of each
Yeah.
other. Okay. And I believe that does prevail in some circumstances. But what I'm hearing from the IDF at the moment now, and let's be frank, when a state is founded upon fear, xenophobia, superiority of other, and hatred, then from the very essence of that establishment, you're going to look on those who you consider to be vermin as less than human. You use the term cockroach. That's a very clear thing. And what we're seeing,
well, that's what they started. Yeah.
Yeah,
This was in
passed,
Rwanda. In Rwanda before the genocide. Yeah. Yeah. This is that they started broadcasting these things and they started using this type of language, cockroach, and similarly, the Nazis referred to the Jews as rats and vermin and stuff like that. It's that dehumanization. It's making them like animals, really, pests that need to be exterminated.
Yeah.
That's the type of language that is being used.
But coming back to your question, Abdurrahim, and your surprise, I share it, that incredulity, because when you see, I'm not going to say ours, the UK foreign minister or home secretary saying that waving a Palestinian flag could be illegal and a crime. Okay.
Yeah.
When you see that double standard and the hypocrisy that you're speaking about standing with Israel on the point of that attack, okay, acknowledged. But what about when that's been taking place with the Palestinians for decades, and there's never been a statement of standing with the Palestinians? Never.
No.
So the question is, how is I think it's a sense of desensitization, that no one can speak. We saw what happened in the Labour Party, and there was anti-Semitism to an extent, not all of it, but no one can speak about Palestine, being pro-Palestine, without running the risk of being called anti-Semitic. And again, we have to reiterate, anti-Zionism is not the same as anti-Semitism. So my thing, Abdurrahim, is that how have we got to this stage where the support means the denial of oppression of a whole nation? Support for one means denial. Let's broaden it a little bit. Yeah. We see the splits in the political parties here. If you're Labour, you can't acknowledge, and alhamdulillah, we're apolitical. You won't acknowledge anything from the Conservatives and vice versa. If you're Republican, everything that comes from the Democrats in America is evil and you can't subscribe to it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Unless you're the one who's introducing that legislation or holding that opinion. How is it that we could become so...
Well, I mean, this is here's the extraordinary thing is, remember, if you remember, the Democrats, right, were saying, if there is a vaccine mandate, we will not follow it. If this vaccine is released, we will not take it. And the only reason they were giving is because it comes from Trump. Literally, yeah. That's it. That's literally it. That was the reason they gave, yeah? Because it comes from Trump. Anything that comes from him can't be good. Yeah, if there's a vaccine mandate, we're going to refuse it. If there's a vaccine that he produces, we're not going to take it. Why? Because it's from Trump, and anything that's from Trump can't be good, right? Another thing, bro, I have to mention this. Because this is something that has been both amusing me in a sense, amusing in not in a sense of I'm laughing about it, but in the sense that it's one of those things like, how do people not see this? So it's very interesting watching a lot of the right wing in the right people who are on the right in the USA today are anti-vax. They are very much believing in a lot of conspiracy theories, right? And they absolutely don't trust the mainstream media, like as Trump calls it. What does he call it? The fake news.
Fake news, yeah.
So they don't trust the mainstream media, right? Everything the mainstream media says, they question it. Yeah. Anything that comes out from the mouth of the government, they question it, and it's a conspiracy. Except when it comes to Israel. When it comes to Israel and all that, they don't stop and think, wait a minute, is this propaganda as well? So how come you question everything that's coming from the mainstream media, except when it comes, they're always saying, what's the other side? Yeah, what else is going on? Do your research, yeah? Look into what other people say. Don't just trust big pharma, right? Look into independent doctors and what they are saying. People are not tied to the pharmaceutical industry because they're independent, yeah? Why don't you do the same with the Israeli-Palestine situation, right? Why didn't you do exactly the same thing? How come you are so blind to this? And really, it reached the irony to such an stage. I'm moving here to the Netherlands, from the US to the Netherlands, but there's a connection between these, right-wing people. There's this, I don't remember her name. I'm terrible with names, but this blonde spokesperson for the farmers in the Netherlands, right, who's been saying, and literally there was a tweet about, they are trying to steal our land. Yeah, literally she was saying they're trying to steal our land. And the next tweet was about, oh, these Muslims, yeah, Palestine, blah, 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 this and that, Israel. And I was thinking, you don't even see it, do you? You don't even see it. You don't even see the irony, right? You're just tweeting this, spouting this stuff. And she's a smart, intelligent girl, but she doesn't even see it. Right. And sometimes I think, how veiled are people? How blind are they? Right. Even when you think they might have woken up a little bit, No.
Yeah.
It's just like you can swallow all of these lies all at the same time, right? And I think this is just, it's both interesting and very, very scary, because it sort of goes back to what we were talking about, is that how do we human beings manage to do all of this? How do we manage to hold such hypocritical, how do we manage to be so, how do you live with yourself when you're such a hypocrite?
But then
Aren't
Ibrahim,
these politicians, bro? Don't these politicians just feel embarrassed? How do
they
they look
don't,
in the
bro. They
mirror?
don't.
How do
That's
they
the thing.
stand there in
They
front of the
don't.
camera and they're saying Ukraine this and that and blah blah blah, and then when exactly the same thing are
It's
happening to the
happening.
Palestinians, right? They're
We stand with
supporting
we
Israel.
stand with Israel. Yeah, exactly. You're right. But then Abdurrahim, let me come in there because you've mentioned some good points. That example you gave of the far right in the US and everything, if you remember, that was similar
Yeah,
to the manner and methodology of those who the Takfiri movement in that instance, where they were like, we don't
yeah,
believe anything in that, but as soon as you hear something against someone you don't like or a position you don't like, it was in BBC, I saw it in the news, and they start quoting the news, and you're like, but hold on a minute, you're saying this is a non-Muslim kuffar society, can't believe anything the kuffar, blah blah blah, Surah Hujurat is quoted, verify the truth,
yeah,
and then you're
yeah, yeah,
quoting the news. So we see that happen often,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I think Abdurrahim, in looking at that, there is a behavioural trait, but when we look right back to our origins, where that comes from, remember, where was the biggest double standard and the hypocrisy there? We saw Iblis, for example, Allah, the Creator, who you've raised to the ranks of the angels because of your behaviour, knowledge, and everything like this. He commands, the Creator commands, prostrate to Adam. And his reasoning, no, I'm not doing that. I was created from something
I'm
better
better than him.
than him.
Yeah,
I was created from something, and it's not
yeah.
from anyone. You're being commanded by the Creator. Angels immediately did it. You're in the company of the angels. And as you said, there's this superiority. There's this disdain for anything
Well,
other than
it's jealousy, it's envy, isn't it? I mean,
as well. Yes,
you look at the brother, you look at Yusuf, right?
yes,
You look at Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, and look how he was treated by his brothers.
right.
So there you have
Absolutely.
Beni Israel for you, yeah. You have a messenger, a prophet Yusuf, this beautiful boy loved by his dad, right? And it's just pure envy. It's pure envy. That's all it is. Envy drives his own brothers, half brothers, to try and kill him. Right? It's only because one of them says, "No, don't kill him. Let's just throw him in a well." Right?
Yeah.
At least don't kill him. Let's just not go that far. But that's what they were willing to do.
Yes.
And the crazy thing is, they're
Yeah.
saying, "Yo, and after that will be good." Yeah. And is this what they're doing? Is this what's happening in Israel now? Okay, we'll wipe out Gaza. Yeah, we'll wipe out Gaza. We'll get rid of everybody. We'll take over that piece of land, and then we'll make peace with the Arabs. And yeah, then we'll be good. And then I wonder if that's what's happening.
That may well
You
be.
know,
And I think the arrogance and I think the presumption, because the normalization of ties is taking place elsewhere, that you can further subjugate those who are closest in proximity, those who resemble you more in the way of living and everything like that, because you feel that looking yonder and at the other states that there can be some success. Now, when Netanyahu was in the US and the UN convention recently, talking about re-establishing or established a new silk trade that would run through Arabia from the occupied territories, that enraged a number of individuals. Okay, you can go back and look at that. That enraged a number of individuals. So he's obviously got these ideas and these plans, and that once we have made good with these wealthier states, then those states now are going to remain silent on their own Arab brethren. They're not going to speak. They're just going to go away, and that is a miscalculation. I would say now more should have been done. I think by the other states, member states, I think a lot more should have been done. But you and I are not statesmen in that regard, so we don't know the geopolitics in that regard. And I'm not going to start even thinking I can give solutions and suggestions in that respect there. But what we've got to come back and look at is those double standards, the hypocrisy that is existing, is not just today. This has gone on since Nakaba. And we know that before, for concentrating on Palestine, they looked at, I think it was the Gambia or Ghana or one of the African countries.
Uganda.
Yeah. They looked at Uganda with regards to maybe moving Jewish,
creating their Zionist state, in Uganda.
Exactly, but they didn't want that. They said that Israel, the land Palestine, is our homeland. We want that. And then you had the superpowers of the time, the British, initially supporting them until they became uncomfortable with the barbarism that they were seeing in the strategy to take over that land. They stepped back, and ever since then, the US have been there unswervingly supporting them in that respect. And then when you look across other aspects of the world, the darker world, yes, we see what's been done in the way of where democracy is not being the democracy they've wanted. Then they've arranged to assassinate those leaders. We see the Ukraine.
Yeah, this is another classic.
Right.
We see whole Ukraine thing about democracy. Yeah. Yet establishing dictatorial regimes everywhere, and overthrowing democracies.
Yes. So that the hypocrisy that's there, it's in plain sight, Abdurrahim. And the question is, so why then do we just watch on and tomorrow we're talking about it now, but let's really look at ourselves. Let's look introspectively now.
I mean, I don't know. I think for me personally, bro Abdul, I think the big question, for me personally, is that I think, and I hope this is true for everybody, it's that you have to ask yourself, how much do you do that in your life?
Right.
That's what I know this may sound, I'm not claiming it's a solution. But I actually do think that in some ways, the only way to change the world is by starting with yourself.
Yes.
How can you if we are going to cry foul about the injustice towards Palestinians, but yet we ourselves within our own family environments are oppressing our wives, we're oppressing our women, we're treating them badly. Okay, we are degrading them, we are belittling them, right? We are maybe abusing our children, we are cheating in business, we are dishonest in our dealings. So then why are we complaining about all the injustice in the world? Yet we ourselves are the ones who are perpetuating terrible injustices. And this is what I find really, really difficult. I mean, as a person, and I'm sure you as well as me, end up counseling a lot of people in, for example, their marriages.
Right.
I'm sure you've dealt with it. I've dealt with it a lot. You probably still dealing with stuff like that right now.
Right now.
Okay. And we've had to deal with these things a lot. And yet this is something I find again and again and again. I see that there are men who treat women in the most appalling manner, and they think they're entitled to do it.
Right.
And they come across with this, I'm your husband, you have to obey me.
Right.
It's like, sorry, you mean if you say walk on the floor like a dog and bark and eat from a bowl, I have to obey you?
Absolutely not.
Is that what you think? Right? And they say yes, this is literally what they think, right?
No,
and these are supposed to be, educated people brought up in the West, and they might even be going to a demonstration in London right now, waving, "Oh, Philistine, Philistine, Philistine," right?
Right.
And they're going to go back to their wife or whatever, or maybe even their girlfriend, right? And who knows what they're going to behave like this.
And Abdurrahim, this is a good point.
Do you understand what I'm saying, bro?
I do. And this is the point, Abdurrahim. That's why I said we got to look introspectively, because Allah tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 143. You know it. We speak about it all the time. We are the Ummatun Wasat. Okay,
Yeah.
that balanced nation. He tells us that we're the ones that are enjoying good, we're the ones that forbid evil. But that's not just outward, externally facing. That's got to be internally facing. Exactly what you're saying. So we've got we're complaining, and everyone here today, you, me, and everyone who's watching today and participating in this today, we have to look and say, okay, we're getting stressed as we are about what's happening in Palestine and what's taking place in other places. But the media's put that in front of us now. But okay, what's happening in front of you? What's happening to yesterday's story with the Uyghurs? What's happening with the Rohingyas and what they're facing and things taking place there? What's happening in some of the Central African countries and the brutality that's taking place there? Whether they're Muslim or not, because oppressed are oppressed are oppressed. The point of the matter is, when we look at ourselves, we are falling short, but yet we want to bemoan and bewail everything taking place there. If we're supposed to be a nation that is balanced, okay, we need to look at ourselves first and foremost, and we need to exemplify what the Dean has called us to and the expectations of the Dean upon us.
And
that
I think,
doesn't
just
mean
sorry
now,
to say, bro, we're not saying.
Yeah, I quickly say, that doesn't mean stop. That doesn't mean stop looking at these causes and supporting these causes.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, but you've got to do them. While you're doing that, check yourself. While you're doing this, check yourself. It's an ongoing process.
And let it be a sign to you. Let it be a sign. I always think to myself, bro, it's like, we complain about the Israelis. Yeah. Would we be any better? I always think, when I think about the rulers, I tell you a little story about myself. Yeah. When I first became Muslim, I was very much influenced by Hizb ut-Tahrir and, some of the Islamic political movements, and I was I on some takfir trip? Yeah. I was like takfiring everybody, accusing all the rulers, they're all kuffar and this and that. Anyway, so that was early on, first couple of years. And then I made this trip to Pakistan, right? And at the time, General Zia al-Haq was the prime minister, or the dictator, whatever he was, of Pakistan. Yeah. And he had set up this tarbiyah camp in the Islamabad University, the King Faisal Mosque. There's like a center connected to the mosque. Yeah. So we went to this tarbiyah camp. Anyway, so it's the first time I really got to sit down with some scholars, right? And the Sharia bill at the time was being passed. Now, so what was interesting is that allowed me to have conversations, right? And also I was beginning to find out about the whole social infrastructure of how Pakistan was really run. Yeah. And I started to realize is that even if you're a general, you don't have control over everybody. You can't just do whatever you want, right? You have these landlords, you have these industrialists, you have the ulama, you have these tribes, yeah, and all of them have competing interests. None of them may be willing to listen to what you want, right? Each one has a different idea about what should happen, right? And I just thought, if I was him, what would I do? And I just thought, I have no idea, right? And I started to realize that it's just not that simple. It really is not that simple. And I don't say this to let rulers off the hook and this and that and whatever and make them devoid of responsibility. I'm just saying, what would you do? Right? I mean, but in detail, don't just say, it's like when Elon Musk was accused of, he could save world poverty. All he needs to do is give 20%, 2% of his wealth. He said, I will sell all of my shares and give it to you. Just give me a detailed plan of how you're going to use that money to solve world poverty. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't. Yeah. They can't come up with nothing. It was ridiculous. Yeah. 2-page of platitudes. Yeah, we would spend on this and that. No detail. I want a detailed plan. How this is going to make a difference. How is it actually going to solve poverty? What are you actually going to do? What would you actually do? And I think this is a question, right? All of us have to ask, right? When we say anything, we have to think, are we better? Could we be better? Are we developing the levels of characteristics that need us to be better, right? And for me, one of the most hopeful things I have seen, right, is when I saw a video of a settler, an Israeli settler, right? An Israeli settler woman being interviewed on Israeli TV. So she was speaking in Hebrew, and she was talking about how well she was treated
That's
by
right. I
some
saw
of
it.
the fighters.
I
Yeah.
saw it.
And
Yeah.
how, she ate a banana and they said, don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. And we're not going to hurt your children and this and that and whatever. Right. Now, this can't be Palestinian, or Hamas propaganda or anything like that. Right. This is like a woman interviewed on Israeli TV. Right. Now, all I want to say is, and I'm not going to comment about any particular group or individual or whatever, right? But I'm going to say as a general attitude, right? If that's how the Muslims actually behave, if that's their level of morality, if that's genuinely the way that they treat people in warfare, and that's their general attitude, I'm telling you, this is the sort of thing that is going to bring victory. Yeah,
Right.
this is the sort of thing that is going to bring change.
Yeah.
Because we all have to realize that Allah is going to support people who are just. The help of Allah is going to come where there is justice. And if you can't deal out better justice than the people you're fighting, yeah, if you can't be further away from sins than the people you're fighting, if you can't be more far removed from oppression, yeah, than the people you're claiming are oppressing you, right, and you don't behave better than them, why would you think Allah's going to bring about any change?
Right.
Why would you think Allah's going to bring about? Huh?
That's right. Very, very good point. And Abdurrahim, thank you for raising that. I want to just look at one thing in particular, and I'm going to go off tangent. It's funny. It's like, it's not funny. As you're speaking, in the distance, I'm hearing fireworks going off where I'm living. Okay, I don't know what the occasion is, and I'm thinking to myself, and we do it here, and I saw it when I was living in Dubai. The fireworks are going off, and we're in amazement. But I'm talking about the sound now, and I just thought to myself, imagine the fear of these noises and what they are facing with the bombs dropping in Gaza at the moment. And yet I'm listening in the distance, safe in the UK, to firework displays going off, and maybe children and everyone there looking in amazement and awe at what they're seeing. But anyway, that was happening while you was just speaking. But the point I want to make now is, when we're looking at double standards as well, we've got to draw the parallels. We acknowledge, the world acknowledges, and it's right at the forefront of our memories every time, the atrocities that were done to the Jewish population under Nazi Germany, the Holocaust and what happened there, and the inherited trauma that accompanied it. That's the one thing. So likewise, there should be an acknowledgement of the inherited trauma since the Nakba, since 1948
of the Palestinians. Yes,
but then also, then I'm going to bring another parallel, because this is that's further away. It's surfaced again. So then, if you can acknowledge these two things, and at the moment only one is acknowledged, only one, okay, of the smallest population, okay, then acknowledgement must be there for the inherited trauma, because it exists, of what continues to happen to countless Black populations in the West from what happened with slavery. Studies have confirmed there is inherited trauma. That's why there's discussions as well around reparations. But these two latter ones that I've mentioned get very little acknowledgement and acceptance from the political powers that be, but also from amongst our own communities. Also amongst our own communities. We should be making those more prominent. We should be talking about the inherited trauma of the Palestinians. We should be talking about, and one thing I want to highlight here, Abdurrahim, a significant number of Africans that were enslaved were Muslim, but that doesn't resonate amongst our communities in themselves as well. So we've got to ask ourselves why this subjectivity, why this selectivity through the lenses with which we look. But coming back to the point you've said, and I want to round off what I'm saying in just coming back to that context.
It's a good point. It's an important point, bro. And I hope everyone can just pause for a second, literally pause on what you said, because I think it has to be emphasized, right? Is that you're right. and we've heard a lot of people saying, we have heard it, right? Oh, the Palestinians have been suffering this and this and this. What do you expect them to do, right? Of course, they're going to react as such A, B, C, D, because of all the stuff they've been going through for 70 years. But then doesn't that also apply to Black people who have been subjected to racism, who have been enslaved, right? Who have been deprived, who have been treated differently, who have been marginalized, who have been targeted, who have been used for medical experiments, and so on and so on. And we're talking about in the West here, right? And it's still going on. It's still literally as we speak. Look at the whole Windrush scandal. It's still going on. It's actually shocking and shameful, right?
And it's not 75 years, Abdurrahim, and it's not since the Holocaust. We're talking
no, it's 200, 300 years.
400 years since this whole thing started. So
Yeah.
that's really important. And I think when we put these parallels there, it really highlights the double standards, but not only generally, but amongst ourselves as Muslims. Also, why is the focus on, it's not even the more recent, because 75 years of generations growing from and living in concentration camp-like conditions where your food and your lifestyle is controlled by an external occupying force. And they're trying to say, we've been good with the Palestinians. Abdurrahim, when I heard one of the female representatives mentioning, the Palestinians could have had the Gaza Strip, it could have been a Dubai, or it could have been a Beirut. They chose for it to be a Beirut. I thought to myself, is this individual mad? You're talking about what they could have done in Gaza. They had the whole of that land, and we see archives on how that society and infrastructure was, and you had Jews and Christians and Muslims living peaceably together. So yes, I think the double standards and the hypocrisy are apparent, but the question is now, Abdurrahim, is what do we individually do about that? I saw a comment come up, and I agree with the observation there that Quran school tomorrow is being closed because there's going to be a protest. And my question would be, why would you do that? Why would you stop Quran school for children and everything to go on a protest? The Sunday school Quran recitation classes are cancelled tomorrow due to a process. I'm not going to answer it, but my question is, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. One is more beneficial than the other. One will yield results in this life and the hereafter. And the protest, don't get me wrong, I'm not damning anyone or condemning anyone who's saying they want to go and protest. We have our positions regarding that. But the point that matters, then why stop something like that? And someone say, oh, that's the placid thing, typical, you guys are not active politically, and this is what you want to speak about and everything like that. Then, okay, let's go back to stories in the Quran. Let's go back to the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because when we look at how to act, we have a blueprint. We have to contextualize it, of course, but we have a blueprint. But one of them is never to divorce yourself or temporarily halt your spiritual religious development. So for example, and I don't know if this happened, and this was something which was back in the days of the 90s, Abdurrahim, you and me were doing Dara. I remember I was in Southall, and there was a discussion that when Pakistan had defeated India in cricket in Ramadan, some of them said that they're going to break their fast and celebrate. And I was like, I don't know if you remember that. I was like, what?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is now, are you going to stop? This is serious. What's going on now is far more serious than a cricket match between Pakistan and India. But the point of the matter is this: when do you stop an aspect of ibadah? Okay.
No, you want to increase. That's what you would hopefully do. You would increase your ibadah. But I mean, I don't know, bro. This whole issue of demonstrate. I mean, I'm personally, I don't have a problem. If you want to, I don't know. Do demonstrates are demonstrations beneficial? Do they have an effect?
They can be.
They can be. It's a big topic of discussion and debate, and maybe that would be we've got another topic. That would be I think it'd be really interesting. And maybe we should bring someone on who's going to hold a slightly different. I'm pretty ambivalent about them. I mean, if I thought they were really worthwhile, I'd probably be on one today.
Yeah, likewise.
I don't happen to. It's not from an Akida point of view or a khuruj. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think in a Western country, going out and demonstrating is not khuruj. That's just ridiculous. Yeah. Position to take. It's well known that it's part of the system here. It's an accepted part of the system, right? It's one of the ways that you make your voice heard, and that's understood. That's part of the way that things are supposed to work here. But whether they do or not, that's my question. Is it going to make a difference? You know, I think for me personally, if there's any advantage, is just feeling solidarity with other human beings. But you know, my basic conclusion is it just makes you feel better about yourself. And you feel you've done something. You'll come home with a little buzz. Yeah, I went on a demonstration. Does anything change? No, it doesn't. Right? No. It probably. I don't know. Maybe Allah knows. Only Allah knows. Really, you know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe so. I'd love someone to convince me otherwise. But listen, bro, Abdul, bro, listen. Let's wind it down. Yeah. I think that that was a bit of a diversion, but I think the point you were making was, you know, really a substantive one, very, very important. And I think the whole issue of self-reflection, reflecting in ourselves. And I know it often seems like, oh, well, what difference is that going to make? But I think the world is just made of human beings. That's what it is. And if every human being is able to reform themselves and be empathetic and feel for other human beings and treat others the way they would like to be treated, surely all that is going to do is make the world a better place. And I think it's a lot because we don't do that. We dehumanize people. We think that some other group of people, whether it's from the color of their skin or the tribe they're from or the part of the world they're from, you know, are somehow inferior to us or whatever. I think it's a cause of real problems. Maybe it's the root cause of a lot of the problems that we have.
And I think concluding on what you're saying, I know we're not going to talk about protesting now. That's as you said, it's a totally different subject in themselves. But as Amar's highlighting, hit them in their pockets. But what Bilal has just said, if Hassan can put that back up, we as a Muslim caucus have got so much impact in what we can do in this society and across the world. And if only we would come together and say, do you know what? We're seeing that this organization is funding or sponsoring this society or this government or this. And then we say, do you know what? Because now, remember, they want the Muslim pound. We've seen that. We've seen that.
And it works. If you make it clear, you do it collectively, right? And it's very clear. You do this, we will not support you. It does work. No doubt.
Exactly. And that works more than protesting. And remember, one of the things I want to conclude on this point on protest, yes, it's there. But when we continue to do what has been provided within the constrictions of the society that we live in, that keeps the powers that be content, because they say they're doing what we allow them to do. Okay. What Bilal is highlighting here and what we can do socio-economically is also within the constrictions. They can't hold our wealth in the way that we see some of the dystopian societies wanting to do. So we need to make sure, we need to think more wisely.
But it's coming.
Not yet. That's right. But before that comes, we need to think more wisely, collectively, and we need to engage in different ways in which we can make our voices heard financially, socially, above that, religiously. And for the most part now, a lot of Muslims, last week, Abdurrahim, when we decided to do this show, you know, we changed the topic, as you know, but I wanted to hear more. I went on thinking, right, where am I going to hear more from those who can inspire? I need to hear more. I'm not saying we're inspiring or inspirational, but I'm saying I wanted to look somewhere and get some boosting that, like, right, someone is speaking about this. We need to, because we're an ummah of enjoining good and forbidding evil. And I don't know about you, but for the first day or two or whatever, there was silence. No one was speaking. I was thinking, what's happening, especially from our co-religionists on the Sunnah like we are, as usual, happened with 9/11, happened with 7/7, total silence. But if it was refutation and edutainment online and everything, you'll see the banging out this one comments and laughter and gaming and all of these things. But there's silence in this area. And I'm glad to see that more are speaking now that a week has come by. But we've got to stop being afraid of losing our constituents, our audience. Yes, there are things about jobs. All of us think about that. I can lose my job for some of the things that I'm saying and everything like that. So we don't want to be foolish. We want, as I said last week, we want to be nuanced in what we're saying, and we want to be impactful in what we're saying. And every individual who's watching this now, yes, can do something. They can show a representation that's nuanced from the dean. They can show support on a comment or some comments that have been said that is balanced, that they're balanced in that particular way. Everyone, some can speak, some can articulate and say, right, I'm going to put out something, a little video. Not everyone wants to do that, but and okay, those who may feel shy to do that, as we've seen some saying because of their jobs and everything like that, at least hate the injustice and double standards and hypocrisy that you're seeing in your heart, and that's the weakest.
And try to make sure you're not like that yourself, bro. It's been a pleasure as always, bro. An absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to next week already.
And I think everyone who's engaged in this today, Abdurrahim and I came on, before we came on, we were both saying how stressed we felt, and I want to conclude on this point. And that stress was because of what we're seeing happening to our brothers and sisters and children, mothers and fathers in Palestine. And it's in line with the hadith that those when one part of the ummah is aching, one part of the body is aching, the whole body becomes feverish in pain and cannot sleep. And I'm sure that all of you who are watching this, and it will resonate what I've just said with you in this regard here. And this reminds Abdurrahim and myself, we were talking about the Balkans conflict in the 90s, and we were very involved in that, okay, up and down the country, fundraising. It wasn't considered extremism at the time. Remember the convoy, Abdurrahim, that came past your house because we got everyone to drop clothes and everything like that, and good foodstuffs. And then some of us went over there to make sure that convoy had got there, and we were seeing what was happening, the conflict that was taking place, and the stress was palpable. You could not rest. You'd go to work in the day, you'd go and do things, but in your mind, when you're meeting individuals, I used to meet Abdurrahim, I think on Sunday mornings we were doing activities, but I'd come to his house for a coffee and we'd sit just to get a breath. We won't speak sometimes, Abdurrahim, if you remember. We would hit the road together, but we knew that what we were doing, like, we want to please Allah. We've got to be doing something because what is happening, and I'm going to say this, Abdurrahim, because you may have forgotten, and I want to show everyone that this cycle is repeated. It's happening in Palestine, occupied territories now, but we would see videos from our brothers who were fighting, who would come back out, some would meet at my house when they come back from Bosnia, and they would show us camcorder footage. And I saw, Abdurrahim, you may remember this, I saw the testicles of children and penises of children from 5 right up to adulthood on a tray. They'd been castrated. This was Serbian footage that had been got and the brothers had fought them and got some. And we saw this is what they were doing. This is what they were doing. The rape camps that were there, and the sisters, the young sisters who were being raped. Remember the stress from all of that. And we had some, mashallah, one of our brothers went over, and some of them went over and brought back sisters from Bosnia and married them and everything because they'd lost their husbands, and they were facing that trauma. And we see that trauma still palpable when you go to Bosnia today. So brothers, sisters,
we don't listen, guys, we don't want people to get frustrated. This is another very important thing. We don't want you to take any rash actions. We don't want anyone to misunderstand something that Abdul Haq is saying. There are legitimate avenues that you can make a difference. Doing crazy things, hurting other people,
not at all.
Picking on communities, writing off whole groups of people, or whole, like tribes of people, or religious groups, because one group of them, some of them are doing something. We absolutely should not be doing anything like that. No. The things we're talking about, brothers and sisters, is improving yourself, making sure that you are not treating people in the very horrible way that you don't like people to be treated. The same things you're complaining about, are you doing that? Are you mistreating people in your life? Is there a way you can help them with aid? So that's what we were doing, sending aid convoys, sending food, sending clothing. So I just want to say, brothers and sisters, channel your energies in a positive direction. Please channel them in a positive direction. Don't and sometimes it's better not to see this stuff. Yeah. You know, I do not like this sort
very
of,
good point.
this gore,
very good
this
point. Switch off.
Yeah.
There's got to be a point. What I've explained to you is to show you over 30 years ago to where we are now, Abdurrahim and myself and many others. Context
This is life, man. This
and the
is,
way
it hasn't changed, has it?
Yes. The way we respond is really, really important. It should not be knee-jerk and emotional. The Deen does not call for that. But what we're saying is, don't look at today and respond emotionally. This has been going on for decades, and you will be involved or witness it to varying degrees, especially with social media. But I'm going to stop on this point, Abdurrahim, because I'm thinking about it for myself. Don't ignore what's going on, but come up to the surface to breathe, because if you're looking at this every day, if you're surfing the web or your feed is showing you the brutalities of what's happening, it will stress you out, and you need to you gotta take a break from that stuff, guys. Don't allow yourself to be. It's very I let it happen to me, before, not this time, but about, I don't know, 10-12 years ago, when I was working with an organization. We were dealing with the whole Iraq situation, and I had to, because of my job. I was immersed in studying stuff 2 weeks. It was horrific, man. It was just the pictures, the images I saw. No, I don't think no one needs to put themselves through that type of stuff. But so anyway, brothers and sisters, take it easy. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Abdul Haq, bro. Jazakallah khair. I hope I think we got a few of the brothers and sisters saying this helped them a lot and they've learned a lot. So that's always a good thing. May Allah bless you all, brothers and sisters. May Allah help our brothers and sisters in Palestine and wherever they're being oppressed. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring goodness to the ummah and, to all the people of the world, in fact. Alhamdulillah. All right, bro, Abdul Haq. Over to you, bro. Assalamu alaikum from me, everyone. And yes, I will say, wa alaikum salam to Allah. Jazakumullah khair. Nothing more to add to what Brother Abdurrahim has said. And we look forward to seeing you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.